Welcome to another edition of Yamhill County Leadership Roundtable, the Tuesday edition. Looks like we've got Commissioner Mary Sterrett on as well. Let's get started. We've got Mayor Michael Cape from the City of Amity. We've got Commissioner Casey Kula. We've got Mayor Cooley from Sheridan. We've got Mayor Wojtowski from Dayton. We've got Representative David Gomberg. We've got Abisha Stone from SEDCOR. We've got Mayor Rick Rogers from the City of Newbery. Woo! We've got Scott Cooper from McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And we've got Stacy Jockinson from Senator Jeff Merkley's office. And last but not least, we have Commissioner Mary Sterrett. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. There's a lot to talk about, some of it old, some of it new, including maybe some more non-coronavirus related things. But what I'd love, unless anybody really wants to get started, I'd love to hear from Representative Gomberg about state level issues right now.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, mayors, and friends. A lot going on in the last couple of days. I'm sure, like me, you have been greatly concerned about issues at the Employment Division and the challenges that Oregonians who are out of work have been facing as they try to claim and receive benefits. And we got rather shocking news toward the end of the week that as many as half of the people that have submitted claims have either been denied or not received their checks. And on Sunday, the governor made some changes in the leadership of the Employment Division. That is a significant change. I would say that the division had been relying on systems that were in place, and they simply failed Oregonians and the flood of claims that have come forward. We're continuing to work on addressing the backlog of claims, to communicate more effectively with people that are in the process, and to deal with those new claims that have come forward for people that are in the self-employed or gig economy. I say we, and I hope it's very clear that I'm talking about the state of Oregon. I wish I had my hands more on that issue. That's one piece of news. Another piece of news is that on the 1st of June, our DMV offices opened up, and they decided to open up by taking appointments. And you needed to phone and get an appointment so that they could manage the influx of people that were coming and address their backlog. And familiar but sad, we saw a familiar outcome, and that is that the phone systems were almost immediately overwhelmed. 18,000 calls in the first hour. Their systems broke down as well. They are working to overcome that process so that they can better serve Oregonians. Out here at the beach, we are very proud of our ocean front and the state parks that all of you like to come over and enjoy. State Parks now is looking at a dramatic reduction in their staffing and their services, and probably falling well short of the 700 seasonal employees they hire, probably only picking up about 300. So they're going to be challenged to provide the level of support and services and welcoming environment that Oregonians have become accustomed to and enjoy so very much. The biggest challenge I think that State Parks is facing is trash. So the more that people can take their trash away with them rather than leaving it at our waysides and parks, the easier that problem is going to be to manage. Finally, I will tell you that yesterday I received news that there may be a meeting of the emergency board as early as this Friday with plans to allocate about $320 million out of the reserve that we have talked about before. At the last E-board meeting, we put money from the federal government into a $525 million reserve. There are proposals to use some of that money for housing, for domestic violence, for child care, for broadband, and for small businesses. The details are still evolving as we speak, as is the question of not only how much of that money we will spend, but where we will spend it. So there's a couple of quick high points that are certainly on my agenda during these remarkably interesting times.
All right, sorry, it takes me a while still to realize I need to unmute myself. I don't have something on me that can unmute, so.
Well, and I should mention with Mayor Cooley here, he wasn't here last week when I announced that we were successful in getting about $2 million for the fire department in Sheridan, something I'm very pleased with.
That's great. Thank you very much. I wrote it down, but I forgot to send it to Mayor Cooley. So, but I knew that you two would connect. All right, thank you. Do we have questions for Representative Gomberg? And he is really, really happy to take all kinds of hard and easy questions.
Oh, that sounds great. And Commissioner, may I ask a question?
Please do, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, I've got another meeting I need to run to.
Thank you so much, Representative. I just had a question about you talked about the DMV, but there's some talk about the governor meeting with legislators about some of these budget cuts, and that the public is not really being privy so much to what's being talked about and would like to at least hear what's going on. So there's a concern about public meetings laws and about the public not being involved in some of these discussions. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, and we're not talking, Commissioner, about budget negotiations as such. There are subgroups that are dealing with budget issues that I'm aware of, and committees that are meeting and going through the normal budgeting process as that evolves. What I believe you are referring to is the fact that every afternoon at 3 p.m., the governor's staff provides briefing information to members of the legislature. And to legislative staff, and so we have been getting reports from the Health Division, from the Employment Division, from the Parks Department or other state agencies since the COVID situation began to evolve. And there's recently been a news report that these meetings are taking place and asking questions as to whether or not they are subject to Oregon's open meeting laws. That's an interesting question. I'm sure you know that at the legislature, groups of legislators meet periodically to receive information, but are not involved in deliberations toward any kind of a conclusion. I didn't organize those meetings. I haven't seen any of the analysis as to whether or not they are subject or why they would not be subject to the open meetings laws, but I've certainly participated in those meetings. I will assure you that that if deliberation is part of the criteria in the open meeting obligation, that that there is no deliberations taking place. For my own part, I've tried to be very transparent in the information we receive and in sharing it with people throughout my district, particularly in the weekly newsletters that I've been publishing that I know most of you receive.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Follow up? Commissioner, do you want to follow up at all before we move?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Abisha Stone has a question for you, Representative.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner Kula. I'm assuming that the commissioners will speak a little bit to the phase 2 opening for Yamhill County, but I'm also curious, Representative Gomberg, what you're hearing about the success, the challenges of phase 1 opening across the state, and potentially what is being expected for phase 2. Well,
as you can imagine, Abisha, I'm particularly focused on my part of Oregon. I say that respectfully, not as an ownership term, but of the part that I represent and am closest to. And I am seeing different kinds of outcomes in different parts of the district. For example, Tillamook County has been stable with 6 positive cases for, I believe, roughly the last month. And they are moving through phase 1 and looking toward phase 2. On the other hand, Lincoln County suddenly had a spike in the last 2 weeks and has gone from, I believe, 7 cases to now 19 positives. In both of those counties, fortunately, nobody is hospitalized and we've had no fatalities, but the numbers and the difference between those two neighboring counties is stark. Is this related to the number of visitors that are coming in? Hard to say. Is it related to a growing complacency with our social distancing, our use of masks, our attitude toward COVID? Again, very hard to say. But the numbers are there, and we'll be continuing to watch them very closely. I believe that this spike will likely prevent Lincoln County from getting to phase 2, but I hope and believe that Tillamook County is on its way. Yamhill County, I represent Sheridan. There's a lot of things going on in other parts of Yamhill County that are of interest, including, I believe, in McMinnville, one of the largest spikes per capita that we saw across the state 2 weeks ago. So I'm not sure how that is going to impact your desires to move to phase 2 in the very near future.
And I will, because Commissioner Sterrett is also on this, I might go to her just for some clarification about what we are planning to do in the county as far as phase 2. Commissioner Sterrett, do you want to add anything? And then I'll come back to Representative Gomberg.
Yes, Commissioner and Representative. Well, just the information we have is tomorrow at a special session, we'll be submitting a letter which shows that we have met the criteria for moving to phase 2. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And so that special session will be pretty much just going along the lines of being able to outline our numbers. We do have one, we're a little weak in, but we don't think it should be any impediment to moving on to phase 2. And the questions that we've gotten lots of questions about the numbers, specifically from churches saying, hey, how come we can only go to 50 indoors, 100 outdoors, that type of thing. But we're just planning on going along with the general guidance for phase 2, submitting that tomorrow or Thursday at the latest, and then hopefully be able to open, it really doesn't depend on us at that point, perhaps Saturday.
Great, thank you.
And just to be very clear, I mean, whenever you use the word special session, we need to be careful. You're talking about a special meeting of the county commission, not a special session of the Oregon legislature.
Correct.
This is especially because I feel like among elected officials, the phrase special session has particular, I want to listen now. Great. Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner. So yes, we will be meeting tomorrow to approve a letter to the state. But other questions, comments for Representative Gomberg? Councilor Drapkin from the city of McMinnville.
Thank you. And actually, my question is a follow-up on what Commissioner Sterrett just said, which was, you said there is one little thing that could inhibit it, but you don't think it will. I was wondering if you could just clarify what that one little thing is.
And Commissioner, thank you, Councilor. Commissioner Kula, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that one of the criteria was successful contact tracing, which is a minimum of 70% of new positive cases that have to be traced to that existing positive case. I believe that's the one. Am I correct on that, Commissioner?
That's correct.
And so at this point, we're not alone in not meeting that, but it's the way we're going to be able to, I won't say finesse that, but the way we're going to be able to address that is that we will be addressing it, and it is not really significant in terms of numbers of cases. So I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Right. And part of that is that we have seen a small number of cases. It was 2 weeks ago. But really, with a small number of cases, if you get one case out of 3 that you can't find the exact positive case to trace it to, you get to 66% rather than 70%. So even then with those numbers, one of them really cuts you back for tracing purposes. All right, other comments for or questions for Representative Gomberg? Mayor Rogers, do you not have anything for him? You're newly on the call.
You know, nothing that I can think of except, Representative, thank you for being here. Thank you for all your good works on that side of the county, but I know some of your good work spilled over to this side as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Especially his work on the e-board. Okay, well, let's go on. I'd love to actually move on to Stacy from Merkley's office for a federal update. What would you like to tell people on the call here and in the community?
Sure. I just have a couple of things to share today, and they're a little bit all over the place. But first, I just wanted to let folks know that Senator Merkley did share a pretty strong statement in light of the Black Lives Matter protests and the killing of George Floyd. And this can be viewed on his Facebook page. And last week, we had a really great meeting with Senator Wyden, Congresswoman Bonamici, and Congressman Blumenauer, and businesses that were run by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And the delegation got to hear, how those folks have been disproportionately impacted by both the virus and the economic downturn. So looking at ways to help those communities better. Similar to what Representative Gomberg said, we are also pushing OED on why 200,000 Oregonians haven't received the federal UI aid that we distributed months ago in the CARES Act. The Senator introduced legislation for national contact tracing strategy and program. We're hoping that if this passes, it would provide $10 billion to states and tribes to hire contact tracers. And then Senator McConnell is talking about the fourth COVID package now, sort of, but he is saying that he's calling this the fourth and final package, and is indicating that the only thing that he's interested in having brought to the floor is an expansion of the PPP program, so extending those dates out for folks who are hitting that line. It's going to end up being a big battle, but I just want to keep folks apprised of where we are, and that's where we are currently. So.
And it looks like we have a question from Abisha for you.
Yeah.
Hi, Stacey. Thanks for always joining these conversations. I appreciate your updates. In regards to the PPP, last week we were told, at least if all my weeks run together now, I believe it last week, the update was that we still had $90 billion in the PPP program that had been unaccessed. Do you know what the current state of that program is, at least the existing funds?
The most recent information that we have from SBA is consistent with that too. It's also very hard, even for members of Congress, to get that information from SBA, but that's the most recent one that we have.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Joya?
Hi, I got an email, I think it was yesterday, from the SBA saying that they were extending the deadlines for the loans. But but that was on the loans, right? You're talking about the PPP, which is a different thing because that's funding from the Treasury. This is funding from something else.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And we've got a Councilor Drabkin question. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We also heard that there might be work happening on a replacement program. I'm sorry, I don't have time to find my notes, so but it's in lieu of I'm sorry, it's hard without my notes, but we heard about a potential act where people will get salaries, will get their monies replaced and go back to work. Do you know what Abisha, you're shaking your head. You're like, yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what the name of that is, but it's essentially a salary replacement sort of a program. Instead of paying people on unemployment, it's a salary replacement. So similar to the concept of PPP, but it's paid directly to the businesses, right?
Yeah.
And since you said this is fourth and final act, that would mean it would need to be addressed here, or that's off the table, I would guess.
I don't think anything's off the table right now. And I think what you're referring to is the Main Street Grant Program. Does that sound right, Abisha?
I haven't heard that before, but.
No.
Okay. So it sounds like the bill that Senator Merkley introduced with Senator Van Hollen, maybe, but yeah, it would be direct loans straight from the Department of Treasury to businesses. So I think our goal is to get that passed in the fourth package. And if not, if the fourth package ends up being very restrictive, I think we would still work to try to get that bill passed separately.
This is specific to paying employees so that they go back to work.
Okay, can we follow up after? Okay, let's do that. Let me make sure I'm getting the right info for you.
And to follow up on that, Councilor Drabkin, I saw something about maybe from the Republican side of the Senate, a proposal along the lines of incentivizing with direct bonuses employees to move back to their employers from the unemployment rolls. So I don't know if that's what she was referring to, but that was what I heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me do a little digging.
Okay. Other questions for the federal side? I just want to note that fourth and final is a little bit concerning to me, the language, just because as Joya for sure is seeing out in the community, we're going to, and then probably Representative Gomberg with the State Department's ICS as being really, really in this for a long time. So I just want to put that out there, that's my concern, is seeing programs that have ending dates without a real clear ending date, as it were, for the virus.
Yeah, and we definitely agree with that. And we, in some of McConnell's language too, he is indicating, short-term fixes, not long-term fixes, which I don't, like you said, this is going to be a long-term issue. Even if the coronavirus stopped right now and the virus disappeared, we still have long-term impacts that we're having to deal with. So we definitely hear that, and we'll keep fighting for more support.
Okay, great. Other comments or questions for the federal side of things? This is your chance to advocate. Do you want to, there are issues presumably at the federal level associated with the nationwide protests over the killing of George Floyd. So anybody want to bring up those concerns? Or is there a conversation in the Senate about that, Stacey?
There absolutely is. So Senator Merkley, like I said, he did release a statement talking about, basically he's heartbroken and angry, but he's working on legislation right now that would require police departments to report officers who lose their jobs due to racist acts or use of force violations to a national registry. So police aren't just being kind of rehomed from one place to the next without knowing their background and what happens there. And we're, looking to support the Black community in any way that we can. So that's, supporting the housing side, supporting getting their businesses back after this economic downturn. And there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and it looks like we've got Representative Gomberg and Mayor Cape who've unmuted themselves. So let's see if they have an addition to that. Representative Gomberg, you did it first.
Oh, no, I defer to the mayor, please.
I don't know if you want to after I say this. I just think there's all kinds of problems at both the state and federal level that are going to take a long time to address and fix. But not necessarily just related to the racial issues going on and protests and riots and whatnot. There's just a ton of issues. So I thought that was a loaded question you provided us there, Casey.
He just wants you to, address 400 years of systemic issues, Mayor Cape. we'll solve it right now.
And I bring these things up. Yes, totally. I'm gonna laugh too. But people in the community look to all of us here for both for leadership and also for knowledge, right? The person below me in the screen is Mayor Witoski, and she's telling people all the time things that in the community that I forget that they need to know, and as well. So likewise, what we can do and what we can ask of our state and our federal delegations as far as working on at least justice and accountability I think is something we can talk about.
No, I think so too. And we do know, we're not going to, we can't fix everything immediately. It's going to take a lot of conversations and working together. And we want to hear from all the communities about how we can try to do this better. Have very privileged to be in a place where we can, all of us have a voice and a platform to try to effect positive change in our communities and make things better for people. So definitely hear that, Casey.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And, Commissioner, I thank you for raising a very serious question. Like all of you, I was heartsick, I was angry, and sadly not surprised to see another man of color die in police custody. And I understand the frustration and the grief that's bringing millions of people across the country and across Oregon and even in our small towns into the streets, raising their voices in response. Our challenge long term is to address stubborn racial disparities, not only in treatment and public safety, but also in education, in housing, in employment, and in healthcare. The legislature is not in session right now. And I expect that when we do return, that there is going to be a number of new proposals. But I did want to take a moment because I went back and looked up some of the things that we have done in the past 2 years to try and dismantle institutional racism and to advance equity here in Oregon. I mean, for example, we created a new law to address hate crimes. We're collecting data on police stops. We passed a law to penalize those who use 911 for frivolous or discriminatory reasons. And we advanced legislation to hold law enforcement officers who commit misconduct accountable. In the House, we voted to get rid of non-unanimous jury convictions. That measure did not get to the finish line in the last session, but is ultimately implemented here in Oregon by the courts. And I also sponsored legislation to help minorities and women-owned businesses get the money they need to either start up or to expand. Those are the things that have not been in the news of late. The news has been about the protests, and I believe that protests are good. Lending your voice to a cause is constructive, but I also have to say that violence and vandalism is bad, and they only contribute to the discord and divisions in our communities. I think that we cannot excuse violence or rationalize it or participate in it. If we want our criminal justice system and American society at large to operate on a higher ethical code, then we have to model that behavior ourselves. Those are a few of the ideas that I was planning to release in a statement later in the week, but I appreciate your concern and your interest. We're not in session right now. I would be interested to hear what you county commissioners are thinking, because you are in session and can address things in the short run, and interested to hear also from our police chiefs and our sheriff's office, because they're on the front lines and they deal with good people every day who are taking responsibility and often dealing with difficult circumstances, but doing their jobs well. But we also know that there continue to be issues, continue to be problems, whether it's based on race, ethnicity, religious minorities, or sexual minorities. And so we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Representative Gomberg. And I'm sure that our county will have this conversation. But in the meantime, both the Oregon Chiefs of Police and the OSSA, the Oregon Sheriff's Association, with the Oregon State Patrol released what I thought was a good and powerful beginning of a conversation. So it was a statement, but it opened the conversation further. So Mayor Witowski also wanted to say something.
Sorry, I had started to unmute earlier. Thanks for noticing that, Casey. I was just going to comment on, while, to Mayor Cape's point, we have thousands and thousands of issues, of course, that reverberate with the local, the state, the federal levels. But I think that, we can't address any of them until we are okay having really uncomfortable conversations and listening to really hard questions. And I'll share a little bit because how I like stories, and last night we had a city council meeting, and we fortunately have 2 Spanish-speaking counselors for the city of Dayton. And, one asked questions about, we've had a very positive relationship with our sheriff's office and their coverage of our city. But we were asked last night, what their training was in terms of responding to and dealing with crimes involving folks that don't speak English, who might be fearful as a result of their immigration status, or who are otherwise fearful of police because of being people of color. And we didn't know actually the answers to those questions. And that in itself becomes a point of discomfort. We should know, but I think, starting with asking the questions is how you work through those really hard conversations, including asking what training levels are related to varied responses based on diversity, on language, on fear, so that there's de-escalation prioritized over authoritarian efforts. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of make that point that there's lots and lots and lots of questions and very complex issues we could be addressing. Obviously, this is a timely one and this is a loud one. And we have to first be okay with not knowing the answers to the questions, and hearing those really tough questions so that we can have the conversations that we've been putting off for too long.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mayor. Does anybody else have any thoughts along those lines while we're, all right, Mayor Rogers.
All right, I was just going to follow in a little bit to what Mayor Beth said, is that these are particularly difficult conversations. They're particularly difficult if you happen to be a 61-year-old white man in the dominant culture. Having been privileged your entire life, it's pretty tough. If you haven't been through the Center for Equity and Inclusion's training in Portland, I would highly recommend it. We've actually, prior to any of this, but actually after some bad press for Newbery and a court case that we lost, one of our primary goals for the council is diversity, equity, and inclusion training well before this. And hopefully most of our department heads, if not more staff, will attend the training in Portland. It's very powerful, but it begs the same question, and as has been said a number of times now, is George Floyd just going to be one more name that piles up ever since Emmett Till and before, and what can actually happen to make the change and make sure that this doesn't happen, and not just to, the few African American or Black people that are in Newbery, but everybody else who is not exactly like everyone else. And we just have to make it so that it isn't just another conversation that ends up with the next news footage, So not to sound that dismal note, but there it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Kula,
Commissioner,
can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, and thank you for this discussion. And I think that asking hard questions is definitely part of it. My question is, why was this police officer in Minneapolis still allowed to be a police officer when he had, so many complaints filed against him, 2 had reprimands? He was even addressed about his aggressive use of force when dealing with customers at his side job at a club. So the question is, why was this man, who obviously had some significant issues, why was he allowed to still be in office? So it goes to, what is the policy of that police department? And if you hear a little bit about what their policy was, is that they acknowledged in the past that this particular form of restraint was not only inappropriate, uncalled for, but deadly. And they used that as an example, but they never took it off the books in terms of training protocol. So when we talk about what can we do at the legislative level, I think we need to look at what are the protocols in our local police department. And then to go to that, I also want to say that what we've seen in our community is that I have to give huge props, for instance, to Newbery and McMinnville and the sheriff's office, because what their training in terms of dealing with particularly mental health patients who, normally under normal police protocol, if you're faced with a threat of deadly force, you're allowed to return fire. And time again, we've seen over the years that our police officers have been trained to such a degree that they're able to forestall that. One particular case comes to mind, and it was one of those, wow, just huge kudos to the officers who were able to restrain themselves in that situation. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, and commissioners know this, I don't know if this present board, I don't believe Commissioner Olson was on the board at the time, but maybe he was, when we had to make a decision regarding a sheriff's deputy who was fired, and then they had an appeal, which they brought before the Board of Commissioners, which is part of the process where the board can say, no, we're going to reverse the sheriff's firing and reinstate the officer. And it was a really difficult situation, but we in the end agreed that this particular sheriff's deputy should not remain in the sheriff's office. Based on that, we went ahead and agreed with the sheriff. Very difficult. This man was then removed from the force, and what happened was the union fought for him to be reinstated. It was a long process. They fought for him to be reinstated, and we had to hire him back with back pay. So I say that not to demean the unions, because the unions are critical in standing up for the rights and for the support of our law enforcement officers. But when you have a bad cop who is then brought back and said, you have to hire him back, even though everything says he shouldn't still be in your community on the force, I think we need to look at that, because this is unforgivable that this man, Derek Chauvin, was allowed to still be in the community because he caused the death of an innocent man. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner. And I do think that is for sure, one of the components of it is the things like the binding arbitration and the having officers come back. So are there any other thoughts that we would like to both share with our federal delegation and also on George Floyd? Okay.
Casey, I guess I have
Yes.
one. Well, and this goes back to either state or federal legislation, and I just wonder where we are going with communities that have put money out into the economy, sort of on our own prior to anything occurring, and whether or not there might be a chance of reimbursement for that kind of funding. I know potentially that'll be in the second round, but I wonder if there's any update on that.
Mayor, that's a great question. I'm looking, Stacy has unmuted herself, but Commissioner Sterrett and I also probably have a little bit to add. Go ahead.
Are we referring to the funds that were directed to the state from the, yeah. So Senator Merkley and the rest of the delegation in Oregon are really wanting to get that included in the next package. That's been a priority. We want to see direct funding come from the federal government to counties and cities and not have to go through the state allocation process. So that's our goal. Senator McConnell has said pretty explicitly that that's not going to happen, but we are still trying. That's where we're at.
Thank you.
And at least at the county level, we requested reimbursement from the state through the Coronavirus Relief Fund for our funds that went out to businesses in the county. The state said, or the governor's office said, no, not yet. Take that out of your reimbursement request. But that in the second round, they would look to the second round of reimbursement requests. They would look to reimbursing those. So that's something for you to also, working with the LOC to do a reimbursement request for. And I thought I saw, Abisha, but I believe also Councilor Drabkin was no. Maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there.
I did, but I lost it.
Okay, perfect then. Abisha.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Mayor Rogers, I wanted to maybe help answer that question in regards to the Business Oregon funding. So they just released their RFI for what they're calling round 2 funding, but it's actually not the second half of round 1 funding, which is called round 3 funding. So the round 2 funding is made available to CDFIs and economic development districts. The round 1 funding, you had made that inquiry regarding whether there could be a reimbursement for expended funds. What we're being told is that through all of these rounds of Business Oregon funding, there are no opportunities to get reimbursement for monies already expended from jurisdictions to support businesses either.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And along those lines, while I'm thinking about it, Councilor Drabkin, is there any news on the city of McMinnville and expanded seating on 3rd Street?
Let's see. There's a final proposal that the McMinnville Downtown Association has completed, and Dave was going to go out and start talking to all the downtown businesses starting last week, last Thursday, Friday, and I haven't heard yet if he's completed that, but his goal was to complete it by early this week and then start, if it seemed good, that would be rolling out. I would also add that there was a peaceful vigil in McMinnville last night, and there's some video of our police chief and others making speeches, so that's a reference point if you want to see some of that reaction here. There's also a high school organized protest or today, also downtown McMinnville, and then I did send out a letter to many of you, and hopefully you've received it, regarding the e-board funds, especially Representative Gomberg. I hope you received that letter. I don't want to be redundant if you have, but just really supportive of those dollars flowing to our local CAP organization, and knowing that our CAP organization has not only the ability and the experience, but the network and the community support to put those rental assistance dollars to work, and to do it right away. So I just want to make it known that I strongly support that, and any information you need, I'm your go-to gal. So I think that's my my report in brief.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor. Along those lines, can we, Joya and Scott Cooper, would you like to also speak to the community in the city of McMinnville? And how about Joya first?
Hey, thank you. Great to see everybody today. We are going to be opening the chamber office on Monday, so we're very excited about that. Of course, there'll be requirements with social distancing, et cetera, and limited number of people in the office at the time. So that's what's going on. And in general, everything's going great. Our businesses have opened. They're trying to work through. Folks are looking forward to phase 2. And so there's lots of questions from people about phase 2. And it's good to know that you'll be discussing it tomorrow. Thank you for pushing that forward. And of course, we're keeping everyone apprised of when we learn about regulations and requirements for phase 2, we're sharing that with our members as well. And a lot of this stuff is on our chamber website as well, McMinnville.org. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Joya. Does anyone have questions for Joya? And Scott Cooper is getting up to the microphone to unmute himself, but along those lines, I saw that today's economic recovery team meeting with Jody Christensen includes a phase 2 guidance discussion. So I'll be sure once I have something tangible, especially for restaurants, tasting rooms, and bars, to get it out to all of you. Scott Cooper, what would you like to tell people?
Commissioner Kula, thank you. Looking forward to that phase 2 discussion. We've had inquiries about that as well, and it will certainly be another positive step in what we hope is the right direction. Not much to report. We did close out our questionnaire for a business retention and expansion program to 90. We reached out to 90 of our businesses, our traded sector and manufacturing businesses in the community. We do have those survey results compiled and put together now, and we will share that information. Between that and the original, we started with 2.5 months ago with the one-on-one phone calls and following up with those same businesses. We will be moving into our third round of reaching out to our manufacturing and trade sector companies to see how things are now. We will follow that up with a fourth round, I guess, but it'll be another questionnaire survey that will be off of the benchmark of this first survey to see the impacts and how things are now moving forward, which will put us at the mark of about 3 months plus from the initial timing of this, of the shutdown. So we'll start to garner those numbers and figures and be able to weigh those out over the foreseeable future. We'll continue this process probably at the 6-month phase, and then extending it beyond that into the year, which will really be telling for us as a community what our impacts will potentially be for the coming year to two, and maybe more. So far it looks hopeful, is how I would best place that. So not discouraged by any means, but certainly nobody goes away unscathed in this. But as long as we can keep the impacts minimal and move forward in the right directions, I have a great reason to be positive about the outlook. So thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. Do we have questions or comments for the McMinnville Economic Development folks on the call? All right, great. With that, I will move on to Abisha Stone, since we're on an economic development kick here. What would you like to tell people in the community and here on the call?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So I have been sharing that we are working, SEDCOR is working at a 3-county level, Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County regional approach to trying to secure some additional funds to help our businesses through this time. We were successful in securing an initial $50,000 through an ask to OCF, Oregon Community Foundation. As I shared before, that in and of itself is a small amount of money to try to spread across 3 counties, of course, but we're using those funds to try to leverage additional funds. So we did submit a proposal to Business Oregon for round 1 funding, and we've heard that we will be funded at a level. They're making those announcements, I believe, today. So hopefully we will be able to share what that looks like. At the same time, they also opened round 2 funding, and this is what I was just expressing to Mayor Rogers, is actually funds that are only available for application by CDFIs and economic development districts. So we did put together a regional ask that was actually very similar in design to our first one, and submitted through the Council of Governments. So the Council of Governments has been a very strong partner with us in this project, this program, in addition to Willamette Workforce Partnership, who is looking to be the administrator of any sort of grant programming. The Council of Governments would be an administrator of any sort of loan funding that we are able to secure grant funds for. So we did submit that proposal yesterday, and of course are hopeful to hear within the next 2 weeks whether or not we will be funded there. The round 3 funding of Business Oregon, which, as I was saying, is actually the second half of round 1 funding, we are told will be made available for application by direct jurisdictions who have not already stood up programs. So there is no match requirement. And the reason why I say it that way is that I believe Business Oregon is assessing and adjusting in real time to the need that currently exists. And so they have already kind of made a few changes to some of these funds, kind of shifting in midair like we all are, right? So when round 3 funding actually becomes available and they submit the detail to us, it might look a little different than what I just shared, but that's what we're hearing right now. I do not necessarily expect that we will submit a regional proposal for those funds, because it looks as though the individual jurisdictions who have not been able to put together funding to serve their areas would be really strong applicants for those funds. And so this regional approach is not intended to compete at a local level. It's intended to support local initiatives. So that's it kind of on the grant side and the work that we're doing at SEDCOR. So on the traded sector business side, very much, similar report to what Scott just shared out. A lot of our manufacturing partners have stayed strong, have continued to diversify, are really looking for support in their daily business, right? And what we're telling them, so we have a lot of new projects that are emerging. We have people that are still looking to build business. We're being contacted by folks saying, hey, what's going on with that county grant program? What's going on with the state grant funds? What's going on with the state loan programs? they are trying to do business as usual. And some of our report to them is that the funds that had historically been there in some of these grant sort of programs at a county or state level, or even the state loan funding, has been diverted for COVID relief purposes, and or is tenuous at best, because some of those funds, of course, are supported through video lottery, which has not been productive through this season. So we have a lot of people that are looking for that similar support that has essentially regularly been there to support business development. And one of the most active areas of traded sector business growth, and I would say people that are trying to be creative and diversify, is our agricultural partners. A lot of interest from agricultural partners who are trying to diversify their revenue streams, who are saying, hey, we've had this idea for the last 10 years, and now's the time to do it, because we either find a way to diversify our revenue streams and to stay sustainable and productive and be creative within that, or we're not going to make it through this next year. So there's not a whole lot of meat on that bone that I'm sharing with you, but I do want you to know that people are trying to do business. They are trying to grow and expand. They are looking for resources to do that business. And our agricultural community is reaching out in a very significant way for support there. And we are searching for that support to give them. So if any of you, I'm throwing this out to the team here, if any of you have any suggestions, ideas, programs that are available, Representative Gomberg, anything that's on the horizon for us, Stacy, same thing. I would love to stay in the center of those conversations, and certainly Scott at MEDP and I talk about these sorts of things quite often. Please keep us apprised of even what is to come. We want to make sure that we're able to extend hope to these partners.
Great, thank you very much, Abisha. And along those lines, when I have conversations with Jody Christensen, or I think about having a conversation with Abisha about agriculture and its place in the economy of our community, I always come back to the phrase where farmers in general are price takers rather than price makers. And if ever there's a time to transition and to eliminate the price taker and move to a price maker, the future right in front of us, our near-term future, seems like the right time for that. So that's just my I don't know, my pitch, right? Let's make farmers price makers. All right, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Dropkin knows what I'm talking about. Like, you don't grow grapes and sell individual grapes on the side of the road just in a giant marketplace. You make really good stuff out of them.
There's no reason to do it if you don't make it. If you don't do it well, why do it? But yes, it is that the economics of ag right now are extremely interesting. And we are seeing that reflected in the wine industry. People are resisting signing fruit contracts right now. I've heard from a lot of different people because, producers are kind of hoping that growers are going to drop prices. We've also been advised to, if we don't have homes for our fruit, to just let it rot on the vine. I think I've reported that here before. As a grower, we're currently, we're holding our pricing to a degree. I mean, we've already, what we've done is adjusted for larger quantity purchasing because of course the ease of bringing a crew in once, but we're really trying to now hold to that. If we drop it at the price we've dropped to, there will be no money made. It's just less of a loss. And a lot of people are in that boat. So, the price of farming, as you know, the price of farming is going up, and there's certainly a tenor that of hopefulness, I guess, is the wrong word, but that people are hoping for price drops and to take advantage of potential price drops, which would be very bad for our economy, our local economy overall.
Yeah, thank you for giving us more of that insight. At this point, I'd love to move on to the mayors, but before that, can we get if mayors are patient, I'd love to get one round of updates from Commissioner Sterrett. She's added to other conversations, but she never got to speak for whatever she would like to. So Commissioner Sterrett, if you're still with us.
I am still with you. I would just know, I think we covered it with the phase 2, and that'll do it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, Mayor Cooley, what would, Kula, yeah, I never really thought about that. What would you like to tell people in Sheridan and here on the call?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm happy to be looking forward to moving on to phase 2 and moving forward in the recovery process. But I have an admission to make for Representative Gomberg, because he may or may not realize that our fire district here is a separate entity. It's not really part of the city. And so I'm glad to hear that you got them some funding, but due to the COVID thing, I used to have coffee over there every Tuesday morning, but they've kind of limited access to the building, so that doesn't happen. So I'm a little bit confused about what the money is for. So if I could hear from Representative Gomberg, maybe he can fill me in on that.
Representative Gomberg?
I have to go look up the specifics, Mr. Mayor, but as I recall, it was for seismic rehabilitation. There may be a couple of bucks in there for coffee too, but I'd have to confirm that.
Well, that's what I assumed that it was for, because I knew that they came up short after they did their cost estimates on getting that seismic rehabilitation done on the fire station. So I assumed that's what it was, but I just wanted to confirm that. So, you know, we're doing fine. Like I say, looking forward to moving on the recovery efforts. So it's always nice to see everybody. And sorry I wasn't here last week, but I was on my way to Yakima. So
that's right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Cape is on the phone, so I'm going to ask Mayor Rogers of Newbery, what would you like to tell people here that you haven't already? And thank you for joining us.
That I haven't already. Well, as many of us, we're also along with COVID and all that is going on, we're also wrestling with budget season, which is so we passed our budget last night. It's you know, the revenue, you know, the expense side is one thing, you know, as we all know now. The revenue side though is another whole animal. So it's a bit of a crystal ball, but we did get it through. Couple of positions, we dropped a couple of positions, no cost of living for our employees, and that just trying to hunker down a little bit for this next period. And then, you know, otherwise, our police chief did issue a statement late last week on George Floyd, and we discussed it somewhat last night again in the eyes of DEI and our goal there. And I'll probably put out a statement later on today. So that's about it for Newberg at the moment.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. And I look forward to seeing the statement. I'm not going to, maybe I shouldn't ask Mayor Cape since we just see his fan right now. But we also have Leslie Caldwell from Visit Newberg on, and I'm not sure if she wants to say anything, but I invited her as another representative of Newberg. Leslie, would you like to say anything?
Oh, thank you, Casey. I missed most of this, so I haven't heard everybody's updates, but we're just kind of hanging back from a destination marketing organization standpoint from any messaging currently, because if you don't have a message about the protests and your position, it just would not appear appropriate for us to be communicating any other type of messaging. So we're just kind of taking a wait and see approach on that per advice from our PR team. And I am participating on a task force. The Willamette Valley Visitors Association has a Willamette Valley Reopening Task Force. And what that group is trying to accomplish is to have coordinated messaging throughout the Willamette Valley for any of our tourist-facing businesses. And Kittree from Visit McMinnville also sits on that task force. And so we're just trying to make sure that we have coordinated messaging countywide from a tourist standpoint, as far as, you know, following the governor's guidelines and following Travel Oregon's guidelines, as well, as far as the safe and strong messaging, and making sure that we realize we have visitors coming to the county, and I think we're one of the busier counties from what I hear in that regard. But just to continue to message out that you know, be careful with your visits and how we need to be just not really pushing the visitor messaging right now. And so we'll be communicating. That task force is working on a Willamette Valley community-wide commitment that businesses would have the option to opt into, and they'll be printing decals that they can put in their windows. And it's basically combining all of the governor's guidelines, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association guidelines, and Travel Oregon's, you know, coordinating that messaging as well. So once we have that finalized, I can report back about that. Thank you for allowing me to provide input.
Thank you, Leslie. And I thought that the Visit McMinnville kind of landing page message was really good. Of we will be here, just wait a little bit. So yeah, thank you very much for your participation in that. The visitor economy is huge in our county, and I want to make sure that it stays protected for the future. So I appreciate your work. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people in the community and here on the call?
Yeah, thanks again, number one. We recently finished our budget season, you know. Tomorrow night, the council will vote on our budget, but it got me thinking, you know, what are the next steps that we as a city have to have coming up, you know, projects and things that we need to address. And one was, although we just got done with one election, we do have the November election coming up, and all the deadlines to get people to sign up to run for an elected office. And so we reached out to the clerk's office and got some information about the elections, because we typically have the paperwork available around the beginning of July for people that want to run for a city council position, for example. So obviously we're going to take the month of June to get everything ready for that. And, you know, there's some challenges with that. A lot of our small cities, Amity included, it's all by signed petition. You have to get so many registered voters to sign your petition to get on the ballot. And obviously with COVID-19, that might be a little bit different. And how do you get your signatures and things like that? And the clerk's office did have some good ideas that I liked, that I think we're going to address at a council meeting coming up soon. And, you know, how do we want to look at that? And can we make some temporary rules because of the pandemic and the state of the emergency? So I'd like to put that out there for some other communities. You know, that's coming up. You don't want to put that off too long. Be prepared. 1 month will come by very quickly. So there's that. And then, you know, I'm still kind of at that. I just keep getting worried. You know, we keep talking about state of emergency and the health of people and broadband. And, you know, it's kind of my rant. I feel like I say it every other day, you know, but water is the most essential thing that people need to be healthy, and clean water. And, you know, we're in the middle of a big water project and making improvements to our system to hopefully be able to keep providing good, clean water, but it's expensive. And we have a lot of residents that have problems with paying their bill, and especially when they're out of work because of the pandemic. And those numbers just keep climbing and climbing. And I just really hope that the state board, the E-board, and when they start distributing those monies from the federal government, that we really do look at what is the essential needs to keep people healthy. And let's make sure we can meet those needs and help the people that need the assistance with those things. And to me, that number one thing, and I'm just amazed that more people don't talk about it, is water. And let's make sure we provide assistance to people that need it. and getting their water and wastewater utility bills taken care of. So I'm gonna keep pounding that bandwagon, I guess. Sometimes it seems like I'm alone in that, but that's okay. And hopefully the right people will hear the message and keep working on it. So other than that, we're just working on our water project and making progress. So we're getting our water filters fixed, back online. We're in the middle of getting some of our reservoirs replumbed, and so it's exciting times for us. And then our issues with our intake, running into problems with artifacts from is still ongoing. They're still working on it. We got some more news today that the USDA rural development's still working on it, so that's still progressing, and hopefully soon we'll be able to get to work on those parts as well. But that's really all I got. So thanks, and sorry I had to take a call from work too. So
it's okay. I'm glad you're with us, and we have the time. And along those lines, if you don't mind, Mayor, I'm going to throw it back to Representative Gomberg to find out from him with the 300 and something million, whether water bills can be part of that. Representative, what do you think?
Well, we're talking about a work in progress. I'm just taking a quick look at my notes. I'm not seeing water on this directly, but it might be. One of the issues that we need to be very concerned about, and I'm sure Stacy will support me in this, is that if we spend money on projects not authorized by the Department of Treasury, then there is a liability that the state would have to repay the money. And so any of the expenditures that are allocated need to closely align with the requirements that those dollars came with.
My understanding is the Treasury Department did authorize that, but for whatever reason, the state of Oregon is not going down that road.
Stacy, do you want to follow up?
Oh, I was just going to kind of echo what Representative Gomberg said, and then also just kind of throw out there that the Department of Treasury's guidelines for the spending are really terrible and slapped together. So the guidelines kind of come out as folks pose questions to the Department of Treasury. So if you read it, it kind of reads like an FAQ, not a government guideline document. So I definitely have your work cut out for you in trying to identify what can and can't be spent there. So I just want to.
And I'll also say this is not the last spending project. The reserve account has $525 million in it. There is a tentative proposal for this week for 320, so that would still leave another $200 million that is potentially available for other worthwhile projects.
Okay, great. Thank you for that follow-up information, both Stacy and Representative. We are at 2:08, so unless there are follow-up questions, I'd love to close us out. All right, thank you very much to all of you. We have a global pandemic and systemic racism that we all need to address. And I know that actually all of you are working on it in your own communities, but I want to say to people out in the community who are watching, again, the folks who are right on this call are working for you. They'll take your questions and they'll work on getting you answers. And thank you, all of you, for joining us here today. And I will see you on Friday? Friday. All right, thank you very much.